Hey, it's Bob. Welcome back. Today on American Heroes Interviews, we've got James Yacone with us in studio. You're going to love this. Come on, let's talk. Hey, good morning, Katie. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm excited. I can't wait
Me
to
too.
do this interview today with Jim. A true American hero, I think, and it's just part of this series. It's just going to be, I think people are going to be riveted by the conversation.
I think a true American hero and one who served with other American heroes. It will be great to listen to his story today.
Yep. Good Americans, best country in the world, best people in the world, just true stories. And I want to read this because I don't want to mess it up, but give everybody that's listening and watching this to the show a little background on James Yacone. I call him Jimmy. I've known him for a long time, but true American hero, West Point graduated, decorated Black Hawk pilot. He played a pivotal role in the Black Hawk Down mission. Everybody, if you don't know what that was, we're going to talk about it today because there's a lot of people this may not know just because of age. For extraordinary bravery, he was awarded the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with Valor, multiple air medals with Valor, and the Purple Heart from being wounded. After the military, Jim continued to serve, this time with the FBI as a special agent and an operator on the elite hostage rescue team. That's actually where I met Jim. Later rising to a senior commander role where he commanded the hostage rescue team, also the SAC of Denver field office. And then finally, he was assistant director of the Critical Incident Response Group, which runs a myriad of things. Anything that we used to say bites you, blows up, or can hurt you was under his command at the Critical Incident Response Group. And just from a personal background, I remember I met Jim Yacone, I think about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on a tank trail someplace in the middle of the hostage rescue team selection. But I didn't know him as James Yacone. I think were you Red One?
No. God, what was I? I was Yellow 2.
Yellow 2. I was Blue 5.
Yellow 2.
So we didn't even know our names because we were going through selection. And that's where I first met Jim. I later had the privilege to not only train with Jimmy, but I don't know how many hostage rescue operations we're involved in, a bunch. We were in several war zones together, been shot at in a lot of places. But Jim's is a true leader and somebody that I think has an incredible story about his life. And just, I'm so happy that you took time to come out here, Jim. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Katie.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here.
I'm humbled really to be here.
Why don't we just start at the very beginning? Tell us, where you were born.
Sure. Born and raised in New Rochelle, New York, not far from here. So, and, with a 33-year government career, it took me a while to get back to the region, but about 4 years ago, my wife and I moved back.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm now, 20 miles from New Rochelle, New York, and I get to see a lot of my high school classmates and hang out. But yeah, I was the fifth of 5 kids. I have 4 older sisters, wonderful sisters. Had a wonderful mom and dad, both have passed. My dad was a high school guidance counselor and a football coach.
Oh, wow.
Got me interested in sports right away. And my mom was a school nurse and raising 5 kids, on meager salaries. They did the best they could. So it was an awesome upbringing in New Rochelle. It was went to New Rochelle High School, very integrated high school, like way before their time, right? And so it was amazing to have, kids from all nationalities, faiths, backgrounds. And it really helped me grow as a person to be raised in that type of diversity and that environment. Really helped me as an Army officer and later as a leader in the FBI as well.
Did your father serve as well, or where did the service is there a tradition in your family?
There is, but I won't say it was a planned tradition. Mm-hmm. So my grandfather, Amedeo Yacone, immigrated from Italy. Mm-hmm. I think he was 19, and he came through Ellis Island. Mm-hmm. And at the time of World War I, that was your critical path to citizenship if you enlisted when you got here through Ellis Island. So they made my grandfather in the Army, enlisted in the Army to get a citizenship. They made him a communicator and basically a messenger that would drive the classified messages to the front lines.
Oh, wow.
On his bicycle with no weapon. we didn't give
Didn't arm him at all.
immigrants weapons. So he was literally in probably the most risky role in the U.S. Army, driving classified messages back and forth to the front lines. And he couldn't speak, read, or write English. He spoke Italian. So he could carry the classified messages and not really decipher what he was
not disclose anything.
So that was my grandfather. And then my father, when he graduated from college in Connecticut, the Korean War was underway. And so he enlisted in the Marine Corps, went in as an officer, spent 2 or 3 years during the Korean War as a Marine, and then transitioned and went to grad school from there to go into teaching.
Mm-hmm. Did your parents work together at the same school?
They did. They did not. So my mom was at a private school, Iona Prep School in New Rochelle, and she was a school nurse there. My dad was the guidance counselor and a football coach, and even a tennis coach way before I was old enough at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of relationship, Jim, did you have with your dad? I'm just curious because I think we're the same age, and I'm sure our fathers are pretty close too, in service and around the different world wars. But what kind of relationship did you have with your? My dad was a tough and kind of rumble kind of guy, World War II veteran. Not a lot of. He loved me, but didn't say it a lot. I'm just curious what kind of influence he had with you.
Yeah, my dad was similar, Bob, right? My dad was wonderful. He was very caring and kind, but that generation just didn't outwardly show it that often, right?
No.
But he took me everywhere. He taught me, baseball, basketball, and football. He was a phenomenal athlete himself. Went to college on a college football scholarship. Then back in the day, the Marines he played for the Marine Corps team, both baseball and football. I mean, he was very, very skilled. And so he taught me all the sports. And when he was coaching football at New Rochelle High School, he would bring me as the water boy from the time I could remember, right? So 5 years old, tagging along next to him.
Yeah.
And watching so many phenomenal athletes go through New Rochelle High School and on to college and even professional sports teams. So, he put a lot of time and effort into making sure I was on the right track. There's no question about it. I wasn't going to deviate.
Yeah.
I know even in high school, even in like middle school and high school, I could tell all the teachers knew my dad. He had been a New Rochelle High School teacher and guidance counselor for a long time. So there wasn't a whole lot I could get in trouble with that wouldn't immediately go back to mom and dad.
Yeah.
And they would set me straight. Yeah. And as the fifth of 5 kids, right? I mean, my sisters did a good job of raising me as well, right? My older sisters. I mean, my oldest sister is about 8 years older than me, but they helped instill the discipline in me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, again, it goes back. You brought it up with parents especially, and I'll just speak from the father side because I agree. My dad was just like that, not a man of a lot of words, but they were smart, right? They always got you involved in team sports because you learn a lot from that. And I'm sure it helps you later in the military as well as a lot of other things. But being able to work in a group that maybe not everybody gets along but somehow getting it to row in one direction.
Yeah. And no idle time.
No idle time.
Yep.
You're
either studying or playing sports.
That's right. Because that causes problems.
That's
when
right.
you're sitting around. How about the rest of your brothers and sisters? Did they have any interest in the military academies or anything like that?
No. My sisters actually, so 3 of my 4 sisters were and still are nurses, right? So they followed in my mom's.
In a way.
That's
service,
right.
Yeah. Service, yeah.
And then my other sister was a lobbyist here. I don't think she'd call herself a lobbyist on Capitol Hill, but she was.
Right.
And so she really did phenomenal work in public service right here on the Hill, and then transitioned to the private sector, as a lobbyist from there. But she, so none of them selected the military. And the way I found the military was very circuitous route.
Yeah.
You were a good student, or?
I was a good student.
Yeah.
I was a good student and playing sports and studying hard. Academics didn't come naturally to me. I had to work really, really hard to get good grades, and I did. It was my junior year playing football at New Rochelle High School, and West Point came on a recruiting trip. And so they went up to the coaches and said, hey, let's look at the academic portfolios of some of your top scholar athletes. And then they, went down the list. And lo and behold, my dad was an assistant coach. And, one of the recruiters went up to my dad, and my dad was like, he'd be very interested. Let me bring him over to you. So my dad, I really wanted to be a mechanical engineer, and I was looking at different schools, and 3 of my 4 sisters were in school in college at the time. And, my mom and dad were, meager, salaries as teachers and nurses. And they were like, hey, we're not going to be able to send you like a top school. And my dad was very much of a realist and like drove this home into me. He was like, hey, son, like you're smart, but you're not that smart. You're not going to get an academic scholarship. You're not going to get a football scholarship to a top school or university. And so West Point I stumbled across it.
Did you have any idea what you were getting into though? When
I did. So my dad, as a guidance counselor, he was like, hey, like here's the reality of any of the military academies.
Yeah.
And then I went on that recruiting trip, and sure enough, they didn't pull any punches. They were like, hey, this is not just a commitment to the university. This is a commitment for 5 and 6 years afterwards, service back to the country. But I looked at the academic program too, and like their mechanical engineering program was like 3rd in the country behind like MIT and Stanford. And I was like, well, I'm never going to be able to like get into a school with that prestigious of a engineering program.
Yeah, sure.
And so it really all worked out. And, I tell people all the time, if you ever want to know why the Army football team has, mediocre years most of the time, you're looking at it. They spent time recruiting 5'10" average athletes. I was not a high recruit for West Point. I really wasn't. And, I was barely invited, as a recruit. And I played with some, phenomenal football players.
Well, this is what I love about guys like you, because you're being completely modest, and to get into any of these academies is monumental achievement. But what was the process like to get into West Point?
So there is you have to go through a nomination process with a senator or congressman. And that was difficult in the state of New York. I mean, those appointments, as they call them, are very, very competitive. So I spent a lot of time filling out essays, and, there was no ChatGPT and AI back there helping you write.
No.
And sending them in to all the different congressmen and senators, and even a vice presidential nomination. Any nomination I was competitive for, I applied for to try to get in. But, as I looked at the academies, I felt strongest about the military academy because it was, a direct path into the Army. I wanted to be an Army officer. And I, to this day, I mentor kids all the time, and I make sure that I tell them, like, getting into an academy is awesome, but you are signing up for the next 10 years plus.
Sure.
And you better be sure that you want to be an Army officer, right? If you go to West Point, or you want to be a Navy officer, naval officer, if you go to Navy Academy, right?
Yeah.
And my youngest son, he went to the Coast Guard Academy.
Yeah.
And it was for that reason. He actually got a scholarship, an Air Force ROTC scholarship, and he was trying to choose. And I said, you got to focus on the mission and what you think is going to, make you want to do your job when you become an officer in any military branch.
Yeah.
So you're graduating high school. You now see West Point as a mechanical engineering school, but you also see the commitment to Army service.
I see it as a path to serving in the Army and, guaranteed employment, which was nice, right, for at least 5 years. And I did 8 total before going into the FBI.
But to build off Bob's question, like what was it like when you entered West Point?
It was a total reality shock for me, right? I mean, I was a pretty disciplined kid. I used to work out all the time, play 3 sports a year, that sort of thing. And I studied hard, but it just took it to a new level, right? And the discipline, the, formations at dark 30 in the morning, memorizing the front page of the newspaper and being able to recite, every single day, like 5 current news stories to any upperclassman that came by, or get yelled at or walk area tours. So those sorts of things, making my bed every day, getting your room totally presentable for inspection, right? Every single day. It was taking it to a new level. Like I didn't know discipline like that. And and it really, it breaks you down the path of a cadet at West Point or any of the military academies is designed to break you down as a freshman and teach you to be a good team member, right? And a good follower before they start progressing and instilling leadership principles and teaching you how to be a leader.
I think that's huge. I think going back to the sports that your dad got you involved in, though, you can see the similarities of how that works and being able to do it. And I also think, though, I obviously never went to military academies. I did go to a state police academy, which was pretty hard. But it also, any traits or characteristics that later on in your life paid dividends, because there was a lot of things that I go back to from a 20-year-old kid in the state police academy. There's this one sign that was over the multi-purpose room, large classroom, and it said, "Pay attention to detail." And to this day, 40 years later, that thing has saved my life more than once.
Yeah.
Just one thing, let alone, like you said, being prepared for inspection, and every time they inspect it, they turn over everybody's bunk, every locker, and everything goes out the window, and you got to do it again. But what did you learn from all that?
I think for me, and the way my brain is wired, it really taught me organization and time management more than anything else. And then contingency planning, like from a junior cadet all the way through the Special Operations Command and into the FBI, thinking through the worst contingencies that could arise and making sure that you were prepared for that as a leader to step in and add order to chaos was critical. And I think that was, one of the things they just, day after day pushed on all cadets. But I think personally too, just writing things down, I was jotting this down in the car. I write notes every day in a book that follows me. And I've done it for the last, since I was a freshman at West Point. Never did it before then. Always did it after then. Like I've never stopped writing, a daily journal of like things I need to do, things I need to follow up on.
Things you've accomplished.
Yeah.
I think that's an important lesson for everybody to learn. I think time management's another one. I've met some brilliant people who can't get anything done. And a lot of it's because they just can't manage time. You know what I mean? And I think these simple kind of, they're hard lessons at the time, especially the way he's learning it in a military academy. I think that's interesting for people to understand.
I like that term, bringing order to chaos as well.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
There's a lot to the, physiology and the psychiatric testing that is available now. And so you can be a left-brained linear thinker. You can be a right-brained, very creative thinker.
Yeah.
You really do have to, as a leader, you got to be a blend of both, right? You're going to have strengths and weaknesses, and you surround yourself with other people that can balance out your weaknesses. But you do need to know and understand yourself and how you think.
That's right.
And it's, you can be creative. You need to be, as a leader, creative and organized.
Yes.
And it's a different way. It's a different side of the brain that's functioning.
Yeah. And as a leader, you got to be able to talk to both of those sides of the people.
That's right.
Right. Otherwise, it don't work.
Yep.
You know what I mean? How did you find the overall 4-year experience at West Point? Obviously, you got your degree and you went out into the military, which we'll get to.
It was, so academically, it was brutal for me. Like just the engineering
just
courses.
Up all night studying.
Just humbled. Engineering design projects, I remember.
Engineering's hard anyway, Jim. It doesn't matter where you go, let alone at West Point.
But I remember getting a 20 or 19% on a materials design, test. And, it's like engineering at the, macro atomic level, right?
Yeah, sure.
Or micro atomic level. And I remember getting a 19% and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to go to summer school. I'm going to fail out of this place. Like what? And then, we all got curved and I ended up with a C+. And I felt pretty good. And I'm like, I got 19. I only understood 19% of that knowledge. Am I ready to be an engineer? Right. So but it was humbling. It really was hard work every day. It was a lot of time management, studying, cramming, staying up all night.
I can't imagine. Look, there's a reason I got a master's degree in public administration. You know what I'm saying? It's not engineering. You know what I mean? So, it's that's got to be incredibly hard, especially with all the other demands. You know what I mean? And that goes back to your time management thing.
Yep.
A lot of demands, especially at some point, I'm sure you were put in charge of something during West Point, and then you got to manage all the other broken toys or whatever's going on.
Yeah. As a sophomore, you become, or they call them a yearling, you become like a squad leader, and you're in charge about, 5 to 6 people
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Then as a junior or a cow, they call it, you're in charge of like 40 or 45 people. And then as a senior, you could be in charge of the whole Corps of Cadets, 4,000 kids, but you're in charge of a lot more than you were as a freshman and a sophomore.
And see, this is what I don't think people understand. I think it's a good point about, and correct me here, on the military officer corps in general, Army, Navy, Air Force. People always see these combat footages of young guys or gals that are 20-some years old and they're command of thousands of troops. But they don't realize, see, that the way the leadership training and the structure of this, they've set that up from the beginning. And I think they do it better than almost anybody. I mean, I've said this for years. The military, to me, does leadership training better than the private sector, better than many of the police forces I've ever seen. Better than a lot of the federal law enforcement organizations that I've either met or been with in some way. And I think that's a unique thing to the American military, because you can take what most kids are still, trying to figure out what they want to do at 25 or 27, a 21, 22, 24-year-old man or woman that graduates one of these academies and immediately gets in charge of a bunch of people. I think they've set them up the best way they can for success. And that's a unique trait, I think, of the American military.
So my oldest daughter, Marie, was actually born the day I deployed to Somalia. And she is now married to a wonderful guy, Daniel, her husband. And they were both in the Army. They both went through the Virginia Tech ROTC program, scholarship, commission into the Army.
Yeah.
They both did 5 or 6 years in the Army and then transitioned to the private sector. And I remember when they were so uncertain when they were transitioning, like, how am I going to write a resume? How am I going to be competitive? And my wife, Sally, and I were just like, guys, you have no idea how over-prepared you are for the private sector and how welcoming the private sector will be with somebody that's done what you've done. You've led, 100 people already, and you're 26 years old.
And they're so far ahead of the curve. Yeah. They're so far ahead of the curve.
And they did. They transitioned really well and landed very, very well in the private sector.
That seems to be an important element, the opportunity that you have to lead, even as you talk about as a sophomore, a junior, and a senior at those young ages, and being given that opportunity versus a private sector program where maybe it's more classroom oriented. Or you're observing.
You're an individual contributor.
Yeah, but here you have real command experience.
But it's real command experience, but there's consequences. See, and this is what I think makes it just incredible, the way they teach these young men and women to do this, because in most instances, there's going to be a very bad outcome, right? Could be a really bad outcome, depending where you're at and what you were in charge of and how good you did. And so there's an immediate, problem if you're not doing it right. And there's a whole thing that the military does, obviously in their leadership course, which I have been fascinated with ever since we went way high up in the FBI, because a lot of people that really are committed to service, whether it's being a nurse, being an FBI agent, being a military guy or gal, they're committed to service, but they're starving for leadership in a lot of these things, because I've had more bad leaders than good leaders in my life. That's just me.
But you learn from them all.
But you learn from them all if you have the open mind to do it, and maybe had some mentoring along the way to say, hey. But I just think the military does it really well. I mean, and it's proven year after year. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When you get done,
I think the key thing in the military is that it's accountability, right? They hold each other accountable. There's a chain of command. You're reporting, and then, if you're not doing your job as a leader, it's going to be called out in front of everybody.
Mm-hmm. But see, I think that is right, because in the private sector and a lot of federal organizations, I've not seen that.
That's right.
You know what I mean? I don't see it. And then there's a lot of machinations if you do call somebody out. And I think it's just something that the military does well. When you finish your 4 years of the military academy, what happens then? Like, you're commissioned as an officer. A lot of people have no idea. I'm telling you.
So it's interesting. It depends on the service that you're going to, right?
Yeah.
But in the Army, there's many military branches. And so you fill out a dream sheet, essentially, of where you want to go and what branch you want to be. And
really? So you're at West Point, and you graduate, and you could say
no. So like in your junior, going into your senior year, you're filling out your dream sheet, and now all of those cadets wants, right, are going up to the Department of Army headquarters to look for open second lieutenant billets
slots
in the Army a year later, right? And it's basically done on your GPA, which mine was okay, but it wasn't that great, right?
Yeah.
It was okay. And your military bearing rating, kind of a combination of both.
Yeah.
And it allows you to compete for your branch and then where you'll go, what duty station you'll go to.
Yeah.
And so I was, again, super lucky. I tell people all the time, like, I was able to go aviation because I didn't ruin my eyes, right? As a cadet.
Is that where you started out the minute out of the academy?
I did. I was thinking I really wanted to do infantry for the first 2 or 3 years. And then on one of my training assignments as a cadet, they sent me overseas on my junior year to go replace a second lieutenant who had gone on leave. So you get to actually jump in and lead a platoon as a rising senior, essentially. And I remember going on that. And
where'd you go to do that?
I went to Nuremberg, Germany.
Yep.
And it was the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. And it was such an awesome assignment. And I had tanks assigned to me and a big platoon of guys.
Tell people when you say armored cavalry, what you're really talking about.
Tanks, armored personnel carriers, right? And all the soldiers that make those things hum along.
Yeah.
And within the Armored Cavalry Regiment, they also have an aviation attachment. And that aviation attachment would patrol the border of East Germany. And so I had I think he was a captain at the time, a West Point graduate, who had just called down and said, "Hey, are there any cadets here, doing cadet leadership training this summer that would like to fly along with me? I've got an open seat." So I jumped in with this captain, flew the border, and at that point I was like, I don't know if I want to go infantry anymore. I think I might want to go aviation.
Back then, you're flying the border of East and West Germany.
That's right.
And what were you flying in?
I think an OH-58
Kiowa
Alpha model.
Kiowa.
Like one of the first. Yeah, that's right.
We'll talk about this more. Jimmy and I are both pilots and helicopter pilots. It's like a little 4-passenger jet ranger, really, is what it is. And you just were bit by the bug.
Yeah, and so I decided, infantry would be second on my order of merit list of the branches of service that I wanted to go to, and I was very lucky. Again, I didn't read enough books at West Point, unfortunately, so I didn't ruin my eyes, and I was able to pass the flight physical. Right, so that's the moral of that story. I'm kidding. Mm-hmm. So I barely probably met. I was right at the cutoff of the cadets that were eligible to go aviation and was picked up to be an aviator. So once you graduate, you head to flight school.
Which is hard again.
Yeah. I mean, flight school.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
the officer basic course followed by flight school. And then from there, I went to Korea.
Where'd you do flight school at?
Fort Rucker, Alabama.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. How long's flight school for the Army?
It's about 9 months or so, I think, if I remember right. And then I also had an advanced aircraft transition to a Black Hawk right at the end of flight school.
So were you flying Kiowas at flight school?
Actually learned on OH-58. I'm sorry, not OH-58, TH-55s, Bob.
Wow.
Like full, think about that. That's an old aircraft. And then at the end of flight school, they transition you into Hueys. And I think the data plate for my Huey was like 1963. I mean, sure. Yeah. It had spent a lot of time in Vietnam, been patched up. And,
there's bullet holes all through that thing that you're flying around in.
Wow.
And one of my instructor pilots, which was pretty cool, in the TH-55s, it was Roger Stahlbeck's uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Who was a Vietnam pilot.
Yeah.
He was one of my instructors.
That's crazy. So, and then you finish flight school, and then after you successfully graduate, you go to an advanced school.
That's right. I went to the advanced aircraft transition, and then in order to get Blackhawks, I had to pick Korea, basically.
Sure.
I knew if I picked Blackhawks in Korea, I would get the advanced aircraft transition, and then go to Korea. So
and then just fly to live in daylights out of Black Hawk on the border with North and South Korea.
Yeah. I was a no fly line unit trainer along the DMZ.
Yeah.
I'd progressed to that after staying in country. I kept extending, so it's generally a 1-year hardship tour.
I've been to South Korea a lot. I actually like South Korea.
I loved it.
Yeah, it was very nice.
I was down at a place called Camp Humphreys, which is about midway down in the country for the first 6 months. And then for the last 2.5 years, I was right up, maybe 15 kilometers south of the DMZ at a place called Camp Page. And I was a no-fly line unit trainer and got to accrue a bunch of flight time, which was very helpful.
Yeah.
And I also got kind of thrust into different leadership positions over in Korea, which allowed me to, at a very young time in my officer career, go through the special operations selection process for tests for the 160th.
I don't think, before we get to the 160, I don't think people realize like Korea's there's a lot going on in the border between North and South Korea. It's not what people see on TV.
Yeah.
It's a very active border. People get killed and shot at a lot over there.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're in a leadership position in a very active,
environment.
Yeah. And so I think people need to understand that. And I think that helps tee up your whole story, because there's just this progression of leadership positions, but at the same time, you're involved in very active areas, whether they're official combat areas or not. What's a daily day, Jim, when you're flying a helicopter on the borders, North and South Korea? Like, what's your daily day start off like that?
But, most organizations within the Army, you're starting off with some form of physical training, right?
Yeah.
With the company at a company formation and doing your daily calisthenics and everything else, right?
Yeah.
And it's progressed in terms of how they work out today, but you know. And then from there, within an aviation unit, it's all about like combat readiness. So you have to keep the aircraft flying.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of maintenance that's going on in those aircraft. There's test flights that need to happen. The crew chiefs and the mechanics are really the ones doing the majority of the work. There's a lot of administration trying to get the parts and pieces to fly those aircraft to the maintainers to be able to. So you're doing that. And then you're trying to make sure that your pilots are all trained and certified, not just as individuals, but collectively. Can they operate as a platoon, a company, a squadron of aircraft and do it effectively? So that takes a lot of time.
There's a lot to that too, because what he's talking about, and you can jump in here, but there's a difference between picking up a helicopter and flying down the border versus flying in formation versus flying with multiple other aircraft doing other things and everybody kind of knowing what. So like you're saying, there's a lot of time and effort and training that goes into that,
right,
to make that. What's a typical flight crew on a Black Hawk?
Black Hawk has a pilot, co-pilot,
yeah,
and two crew chiefs,
yeah,
generally. And the crew chiefs are the door gunners, right? So if
yeah.
you're going into a combat environment, the crew chiefs are the door gunners. And man, I've just been blessed with some of the most hardworking, talented, really intelligent crew chiefs throughout my career, but definitely even in Korea, certainly. But then as I transitioned to the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, I mean, they've recruited and, maintained kind of the elite of crew chiefs, mechanics, and door gunners. And they were just so talented at what they did. Yeah, I learned a lot from all the guys in my platoon at the 160th. Mm-hmm. Warrant officers, crew chiefs, taught me a lot, right? Because I was the new guy coming in, magnificent machines, very complex compared to the regular Army aircraft.
Oh, sure.
And then the special operations community demanded excellence, right? I mean, our slogan in the 160th was plus or minus 30 seconds. And you literally would fail your check ride if you didn't arrive at time on target plus or minus 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. And God help you if you were on an actual mission and you didn't arrive at your target plus or minus 30 seconds with, the special operations ground force, you'd hear it in those after actions. It would be brutal, right? So they lived and died by the clock, right? And it took a lot of training and skill from everyone across the organization to make that happen.
Well, let's talk about that, though. So you finish your tour of Korea. How do you go about, and one, tell people what this 160th is, because a lot of people don't know. But two, how do you go about transitioning from an officer flying, not that it's not routine at all, but you're flying Black Hawk, sophisticated aircraft across the border. But then how do you get selected into or apply to get into probably one of the most elite aviation branches in any service, especially when it comes to helicopters or working with special operations units? How does that happen?
That's a great question, Bob. So the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, right? So a little bit about what it is. It was a unit that used to be called Task Force 160, but it was born out of the catastrophe that the U.S. military had during the Iran hostage rescue situation, when the Iranian embassy was taken over and our U.S. citizens were held captive. So they realized pretty early on, the military, that they needed a dedicated special operations aviation force, not just the ground force. They needed a whole enterprise. So that was the birth of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. They would go on recruiting tours around the world. So they had a pretty significant budget to do that recruiting.
Yeah.
I was blessed in Korea because I had some veterans of the 160th that were in country with me. And actually a senior officer, a guy named John Binkley, who lives in this area, in the greater Washington, D.C. area, was a phenomenal mentor for me. He was a battalion commander at the time in Korea, but he had come from the 160th and was there, almost to the formation of the unit, right?
Yeah.
He was one of the original guys that was there
Yeah.
and helped build the unit up as an officer. And so, I talked to him about it. I always wanted to go into special operations. And so I talked to Colonel Binkley about it. He was kind enough to just bestow some good wisdom on me. And he said, hey, the selection process is hard. It's very difficult. Give it a shot. He goes, you're young. He goes, they've never taken lieutenants. And they had taken lieutenants, but most of those lieutenants were warrant officers before they were lieutenants.
A lot of experience.
They were experienced pilots,
experienced
right?
guys, yeah.
And so, I had about 1,000 flight hours, and John Binkley was like, I think you're ready to do this. Give it a shot.
Did you need a set number of NVG time or anything like that?
Yeah, you really did. They wanted to see, I can't even remember, it might have been 250 hours of night vision goggles and 1,000 hours of total flight time. And I think I was, right there.
Yeah.
And so I went through the selection process and, lo and behold, like Forrest Gump, they took me into the unit. And it was about a week and a half maybe.
Yeah.
Lot of flight planning, putting you in an aircraft that you had no idea. It looked like the spaceship compared to a normal Army aircraft.
Right, sure.
And they were really testing your trainability and your flexibility and judgment. That's really what it boiled down to, is trainability, flexibility, and then how you can critically think under duress,
right,
and your judgment.
Right.
Which is exactly what, the hostage rescue team will volunteer.
Oh, it's 100% the selection
right?
process.
And that's all they were testing, right?
Right.
And, again, they're throwing you into different scenarios, and they're asking you to do basically time, distance, and heading navigation in a totally unfamiliar area and arrive at a target plus or minus 30 seconds, right?
Jim, at this stage of what's going on, do you think the Army is going to be your full-time career? Are you in it? Are you thinking family? You're deployed a significant amount of time.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. So,
and you're 3 years in, right? It was a one-year assignment in Korea. It turns into 3.
3 years in. And then when I was selected for the 160th, I really started thinking seriously about the Army as a long-term.
You're advancing.
I wanted to be a career officer, right? And I was exposed to, again, just phenomenal leaders in the 160th, as well as, subordinates, superiors. Everybody around me was the best at what they did.
Yeah.
And it made me, be better. Now, fast forward 5 years of constant deployments, 250 days a year on the road. And I started to, I think I told you, my daughter was born the day I deployed to Somalia. And I literally left my wife in the recovery room, right? And was gone for, 3 or 4 months. After spending 250 days a year or so on the road, kind of every year for 5 years, I at a certain point, I said, I want to continue to serve my country, but I have to figure out how to do it and balance the family work life, because it was really unsustainable. And so, I was fortunate. I had great leaders in the 160th in the military that were grooming me for additional commands, and they were going to send me to grad school and then come back, which, I'd have incurred about 3 or 4 more years. And I had to make a decision. And so the FBI started hiring when you and I joined for the first time in years. It had been on a hiring freeze. And all of a sudden they opened the doors, and I was like, I think that would keep me home more. I could see my family and balance, service to the country with what I wanted to do.
So Korea, you're still kind of just halfway into it. So you're finishing Korea. You're becoming part of communities, more elite communities.
Yeah, and as a junior officer, you really, I didn't know if I'd want to.
You're still kind of
commit
weighing
to
and
20
looking
or 30 years in the military or not. But as I got to the 160th and was exposed there for the first couple of years, I was like, wow, this could be a phenomenal career for me. but it got hard. It wore you down, right, through those constant deployments through time. And it just, for me, it caused a lot of reflection on like, I've got to be a good father. I got to be more home, and able to raise my kids.
How did those deployments start? Like when you transition, do you get little notice? Are you deployed for months at a time in different parts around the world, depending on the conflict? Or?
Yeah, it depends on. So the training deployments are on the calendar and are somewhat predictable, but they do change because the real world deployments are constantly coming up. Mm-hmm. And it depends on your, which unit is kind of in the mission cycle, that unit will get deployed more often. But some of the deployments were totally unpredictable, right? So between training and trying to maintain certifications in like the ocean environment, the sand environment, the mountain environment, and helicopters, it takes a lot of time. And it's a lot of training time as well as, actual mission time, which means you got to be away to do that elsewhere.
Yeah. No, you're painting a very visual picture with all those different environments and how a helicopter operates in those. Yeah.
Well, especially the task force. Before we talk about when you got sent off to Mogadishu, because I don't think that everybody understands this, and I'm going to read something about the Battle of Mogadishu. You can fill in the holes. And by the way, I would also encourage everybody, Jim brought up earlier about why the task force team was built really around the Iranian hostage. There's a great stuff online to look this up. There was a crash. A lot of people were killed in the rescue effort, hence the task force being built out of it, if you don't know. But the Battle of Mogadishu, often called Black Hawk Down, was a fierce urban battle fought in Somalia in the capital around October 3rd and 4th of 1993. It involved U.S. Special Forces, Army Rangers, Delta Force, alongside Pakistani and Malaysian forces against Somali militant loyal to warlord Mahad Farouk Adid. The initial mission to capture Adid's lieutenants, and this is, we're going to get to this in a second, it's going to be my first question, quickly turned into a desperate fight for survival among a lot of men that had been shot down in 3 Blackhawks over a period of time and other things going on there. The ensuing 18-hour battle resulted in significant casualties on both sides, but over, I think, 18 Americans were killed, over 73 wounded.
19. So there was one, Matt Ryerson killed the day after the battle.
So 19.
Yeah, 19.
Yeah, it's an incredible loss of life in a very short amount of time. And there's just so many, I would encourage people to go look this. There's so many acts of heroism and just heroes throughout this. And just really, it makes you proud to be an American, to listen to how guys were trying to help each other throughout this entire mission. Iconic images of U.S. soldiers being dragged around in the streets, and I'm not going to read everything else about it because it just breaks your heart. But what I don't think people understand, Jim, and we're going to get into this and really have you walk us through it, that wasn't your guy's first mission. Like, I think a lot of people think like this is like, they did this 1 or 2 times and this is when it happened. And I think what would be really relevant, if you could, is walk us through, you get deployed to Somalia. What were you even thinking? It's Somalia, what are we doing? But how many missions had you guys gone into before this all broke loose?
Yeah, within Somalia, I think that was our 7th or 8th mission in country. And then we had been flying every single day and actually doing ruse missions, right, to try to confuse the enemy. Let me back up, though.
Sure.
So that was really, if you look at Somalia, it was the U.S.'s effort to build momentum within the United Nations and feed a starving nation, right? So there was hundreds of thousands of people dying of starvation every single year. And so we entered that obligation as a peacekeeping force, right? As a member of the United Nations force, not the Special Operations Community, but the 10th Mountain Division and others were there well before we were.
Yeah.
And they were just trying to feed the starving people.
Yep.
The U.S. as a government did not understand the culture, the tribal culture there.
Yeah.
We certainly, made some very naive assumptions at a geopolitical level of how to resolve that situation. And, we've done it again, right? Through time.
Sure.
But that was a it was a bit of hubris on the part of the U.S. and the United Nations on how we were going to bring food to the starving people. So what happened was, there was the population of Somalia is about of Mogadishu is about 1.8 million people.
Yeah.
That's a big city.
Yep.
I don't know, there were different estimates, right, of how big was Adid's clan. Adid's was the largest and most powerful clan. And, it varied from 40% of the population, whatever. Every male 12 years and older carried a weapon, carried an AK-47.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was just part of their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what Adid was doing was he was intercepting the goods and services that the United Nations forces were trying to deliver to the starving population, and then selling them on the black market.
Yeah.
And so you had an escalation of violence through time by the UN forces, which included the US, which ultimately led to a thing called the Pakistani massacre, where there was a huge amount of Pakistanis that were killed by the Somali clan in an escalation of violence. And then it just went back and forth. And so the Special Operations Command had been spinning up a Special Operations Detachment pretty early on as things were starting to escalate. But at the geopolitical level, they were like, we're not ready for this to be a combat operation, and we're not going to send in a big force. Within the Special Operations Command, we were very used to operating off of an aircraft carrier that would have given us kind of speed and surprise, right, over the horizon, out in the ocean. And by the time they committed, the Clinton administration had committed us, Adid had gone underground. All of our intel had dried up on who was who in the organization.
Right.
And we essentially were not, we didn't use the standard tactics, techniques, and procedures that a special operations strike force would use. It's speed, surprise, and shock effect, right? Mm-hmm. We decided that we were going to kind of put this 200 to 300 person detachment on the airfield, surrounded on three sides by the enemy.
Yeah.
And we thought we were going to rattle our saber as a country, and the Somalis were going to kind of roll over. And they didn't, right? And so we went on 7 missions prior to, I think, the Battle of Mogadishu mission on the 3rd of October. And there was a gradual escalation of violence, even amongst the missions that we went on, the force that we received back, And we were having some success. We were picking off Adid's kind of senior leaders within the organization and trying to cause the organization to topple and the other rival clans to overtake them, right? That we could have, peaceful negotiations about letting the food and the supplies move to the starving population.
Right.
So that's kind of the conditions. I probably didn't answer your full question, but
no, it answers it. I just think when you bring this up around people that actually remember this battle because of age differences, I think a lot of people think this was the first mission into the country.
Yeah. No.
And obviously you just delineated that it was not. And as you said, right on the money, obviously from your background, this had gone on for a while, way before you guys got involved. And I think there was other warnings by military generals and others saying, hey, this is getting ready to cook off into a war. This is a pretty big deal. We need to handle this in different ways. I think I've read a lot on that by, I think, the commanding general that actually came over there to look at it.
Bill Garrison was a phenomenal leader.
And kept raising the flag, and it wasn't heeded to by the administration. And then you get into this situation where it turns into the Battle of Mogadishu.
Yeah.
Almost like an impatience with the administration at that time. They wanted to show progress on the ground.
Yeah, they did. And then they really wanted to show that we were trying to dismantle the Habergitter clan or Adid's clan. Mm-hmm. So that, again, the goal was really to feed the starving population of Somalia.
Enable the peacekeeping mission.
But then there was this escalation of violence, from them to the U.S. forces and UN forces, and then from us back towards them. And it spiraled quickly over a period of, weeks to months, where that escalation necessitated this special operations force going over there. And then once the decision was made, okay, we're going to put a special operations detachment forward to take care of Adid's leadership and get him out of the way. We had already lost, our intel had dried up completely. The enemy was learning, and seeing what we were doing. And we were shadowing our efforts through CNN and other channels of what we were going to do.
Yeah.
And then we didn't, kind of our hand, one arm was tied behind our back. We didn't get to use an aircraft carrier. We didn't get to bring armored personnel carriers with us. We didn't get to bring gunships and other things that we would have.
Key elements to your
key
success.
Elements in the planning process that as a planner, we had put forward those recommendations, and they were kind of denied because it would have looked too offensive in what should have been a peacekeeping operation. So we made some strategic blunders. And the battle itself obviously was super intense. It was a 20-hour battle or so. And there was heroism everywhere. And there were a lot of people, adapting and overcoming what was happening on the ground. And we were super close to losing the entire force. The whole force was almost at a point of being overrun had it not been for, the heroism of the A.H. Littlebird gun pilots, the Black Hawk pilots and crew chiefs, and the ground operators from Delta and the Rangers. And as important, the 10th Mountain Division. Those guys, they were only ones that had APCs along with the Pakistanis and Malaysians and others. And we were commandeering their soldiers and their vehicles to drive into this raging battle.
Can you back up just for a second though? Because you wake up on October 3rd and you're told today's going to be the operation. What notifications were in place, or when you planned that out, what was the initial kind of time frame and battle plan that you guys had created?
Yeah, great question. The battle. So the city of Mogadishu, to fly in a Black Hawk or a Littlebird over the city, it takes you about 6 minutes to cross the whole thing, right? So, from takeoff till the insertion point might have been a 3 or 4 minute flight. I mean, it was a very quick flight, but a highly densely populated urban area with shacks and shanties, right? Not big skyscrapers, but shacks and shanties and concrete buildings that we had, and very, very narrow dirt roads, which when a helicopter lands, it kicks up all kinds of dust, right? So you don't do things quietly in a helicopter over a city. It's
populated city.
Over a very, very densely populated city in the middle of the day, right? And we were, we prided ourselves in being able to operate at night, but the intelligence presented itself during the daytime, right? One of Adid's key lieutenants, and they were doing a key meeting in a place called the Bakra Market in Mogadishu. And honestly, we knew that was a stronghold of Adid's. We didn't know how, what kind of weapons they actually had stashed there. But, it was like kicking over a hornet's nest, right? And so we started seeing, not just automatic weapons fire, but RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades, in the hundreds, right, being shot at aircraft. And other weapons that we had not seen before, because we had, again, a little bit of hubris, right? We'd gotten conditioned. We had been there at that point, month and a half, 2 months, 7th mission, 8th mission. And we said, all right, well, I think we can do this. This is a calculated risk. And things didn't go right from the point of insertion. And the movie and the book really cover it well.
I think the whole aspect you brought up a few minutes ago, and people that have ever been involved in hostage rescue missions or special operated, that speed, surprise, violent action is your credo, right?
Yep.
That's how you win. And the fact that they got to watch you guys over time, and I'm sure
with walkie-talkies from the rooftops,
and they're watching the little birds come, and then the big helicopters come, and then the guys get out of the big helicopters and slide down the rope, and they start to figure it out. When you guys take off that morning or whenever to launch this operation, walk us through that. What actually happens? How many?
It was about 3 p.m. when we took off, and it was probably again a 4 to 6 minute flight to the insertion point. And all of our previous missions, right, we would have ground convoys come up after the insertion to actually exfiltrate the soldiers. Because the streets are so narrow, you really couldn't get the Blackhawks down in the streets.
You're dropping them off, and
so we're dropping them off and providing close air support from above during the operation, and then leading the ground convoys that will pick up the friendly forces and drive them back to the airfield. So total missions prior to that might have taken an hour and a half. And so
Expect the same
we,
here.
we expected the same, Now we had planned for contingencies. We planned for down aircraft. We had done, a lot of contingency planning. But again, through time, we had seeded a lot of our techniques and our tactics, not had armored personnel carriers, not had like AC-130 gunships, which are the big airplanes with the big gunships in the sky that we had trained with for, ever in the Special Operations Command. We did, again, we were predictive because we were operating day in and day out in an airfield surrounded on three sides. Literally, you could watch the Klansmen on the rooftops outside of the airfield just talking to walkie-talkies every time somebody would move to an aircraft.
It's almost unbelievable. And the only reason why I say this is because right before I retired out of the FBI, I went to Mogadishu with the deputy director of the FBI. I've been with Jimmy all over the world and been in the worst austere environments
You guys don't get deployed to happy places.
In my life, but the only time I've ever seen him worry about me is when I was going to Mogadishu, because he literally made a special trip up to headquarters and said, "Bob, what the hell are you guys doing?" And I think, I can't get into what we were doing over there, but I was probably half mile from the Mogadishu Mile, which we talk about. But it's still the same. I mean, it's still everybody over there's got an AK-47. There's a whole bunch of Toyota Land Rovers running around with anti-aircraft guns in them, and it's pretty much, that's 20 years later. It's just a lawless place. But you can't understand how compact and how many people are in this area he's talking about. Like, I think that is such a significant factor of all this, let alone they were heavily armed and they had watched and they had learned, and now they're waiting, right? They're waiting for the little helicopters to go away and the guys to come on the ropes, and then all of a sudden they're going to do whatever they do. But it is such, when he says this, like, I've seen it, it's just ungodly packed with people. And I don't think people understand the Klan aspect, but maybe we clarify that a little bit because
packed with people and every 12-year-old and above walking around with an automatic
when he
weapon.
says, look, 20 years later, everybody had a gun and everybody had an AK-47 and every Land Rover had an anti-aircraft gun running around in the streets. It's still dirt everywhere. There's a paradox because the water's beautiful. I mean, it's crystal clear blue water. You would think somebody would open up a Ritz-Carlton, but it's just a terrible environment. And I just think it really needs to be, stated when he says this, like, people don't understand how dense of a community this is. So when these poor guys end up going down in these locations and they're surrounded by bad guys, it's just a bad situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you also, we assimilated to the culture there, right? And we were, trying to feed the starving people right from the beginning.
Right. With the UN forces.
With the UN forces and trying to support them in different ways. But it required a lot of discipline for all of the U.S. soldiers and UN soldiers because, again, it's part of their culture to carry a weapon. So you can't just go arbitrarily shooting people. So you literally had to wait for somebody to point a weapon at you and shoot in order to return fire, right? And so the rules of engagement were, again, not on our side, really. And we were trying to be a very disciplined fighting force over there, trying to get food to the starving population. That played a significant role in the battle. Now, when the whole, city erupted, it was a different story, right? So anybody coming towards the battle area with a weapon was presumed not to be doing good things.
Where were you in this? Like, you said 3:00, you guys.
So I was in Super 6-2. I was the second Black Hawk, and I'd been paired with Super 6-1. And we were inserting the primary fighting force of Delta right to the objective area to go after, the bad guys.
So you're going in there, fast roping down from your helicopter.
And then there was 4 other Black Hawks that were inserting the Rangers on the perimeter force. So they would be inserted and face outward, essentially, to contain the battle area. In addition, there was Little Birds carrying Delta operators.
When you say low, Hughes 500?
Yeah, Hughes. They were
300 or 500.
Yeah, 500s, and they were
little
T-10s.
aircraft, probably with miniguns or something, armor guys sitting on the side that would provide air support.
And so I was the Super 6-2 in a flight of 19 aircraft total involved in the battle, but the Super 6-1 would do the insertion. We would be right behind them, and then again, once we cut our fast ropes, we each had about 12 operators on board. Once we cut our fast ropes, we kept snipers on board, 3 snipers each, because we knew how densely populated it was. And the miniguns were just really not within our rules of engagement. We wanted to be precise and with our returning fire should a threat present itself. And so we would get above the target area and move in orbits or close air support orbits and listen for calls for fire from the ground operators inside the target that were receiving fire from around their position.
Let me translate one thing. So when he says cut their ropes, when people fast rope out of helicopters, you're not attached. You're holding on with your hands, basically. But when everybody's out, they're not going to pull up a 70 or 100-foot fast rope or whatever it was. Either the crew chiefs or tactical air officers are going to cut them away so that the pilots can now fly away so they don't catch on something. So
yeah, continue to support. And you guys are trying to get to this market area where the intelligence is telling you these high-end targets could be meeting.
Right. With a pretty significant armada, right, of aircraft.
Yeah.
So again, there was nothing by that point, months into the deployment, nothing we did was a secret. And we would routinely fly on ruse flights. Like we would just, middle of the day, crank up the aircraft, fly around, do a false insertion, come back to the airport, just to try to keep the enemy on their toes and guessing. And so we would do that, once or twice a day. We would do those ruse flights. But this flight, we took off at about 3 in the afternoon, expecting to be back probably by 4:30. And it was, as the bird flies, maybe 3 miles from the airfield.
Pretty fast to get there.
And then the Humvees would pick up the ground force after they grabbed the enemy at the target building, and they would drive them back. And then again, we would provide close air support for the convoys heading back to the airfield, the friendly convoys.
And so they enter in and people start going down?
So we had Super 6-1 was the first aircraft shot down. So my wingman was the first one shot down, and certainly the most skilled aircraft. Like we had the flight lead for the whole, mission, Cliff Walcott and his co-pilot Donovan Briley were just exceptional pilots, and they were leading the whole armada. They received a rocket-propelled grenade that hit their tail rotor. Again, they were in orbit. They were providing close air support. I was like on the opposite side of the orbit from them.
So they already dropped their team.
Yeah, they dropped their team. And they spun out of control and crashed. And they crashed, multiple blocks away from the target location where we had quite a few friendly forces. And so there was Rangers that were somewhat nearby where they crashed, and they obviously the mission became get to the downed aircraft and try to help the crew members out. Cliff and Donovan were killed on impact, which is unfortunate. But the 2 crew chiefs were alive. The Delta snipers were alive, and we could see them from above, right? So, we're making radio calls to the command and control aircraft, relaying what we're seeing. We're trying to listen for calls for fire from the ground team. The Rangers that were moving in that direction were receiving a lot of fire now. So the whole city was engulfed in this battle. And we got to a certain point where we just couldn't respond to the calls for fire fast enough in our aircraft. And so we asked for another Black Hawk that had dropped the Rangers off, and they were holding north of the city. We asked for one of those aircraft to come and join us in an orbit to respond to all the friendly forces' calls for fire from both the crash site as well as the convoy that was still trying to pick up what actually they did capture the guy we were after, right? Now they were trying to get the good guys out of the city and also secure the crash site.
Oh, so they did. They captured the guy.
They captured the guy we went after. That's right.
But they're stuck and trying to get
stuck.
out.
And now everybody's pinned down, and the focus of the battle was not about, getting people out of the city. It was actually trying to protect that crash site, get everybody out of the crash site and off the battlefield and leave no one behind.
In a densely populated million-plus city with everybody armed.
Right.
It's incredible.
And so Super 6-4 was authorized to, come forward and from their holding area and join us in a close air support, cap around the target area and the crash site. And it was Mike Durant and Ray Frank, again, exceptional pilots, exceptional crew chiefs in the back of those aircraft, in the back of their aircraft as well. No snipers, right? Because all the Rangers had been inserted, so they were empty, but they had miniguns, and they were, again, an exceptional air crew. Ray was, I think, our head instructor pilot within my platoon. I learned a lot about flying from Ray. And Mike Durant was in a sister platoon, but like an exceptional flight lead, really gifted pilot. And they joined us for probably a minute or two. And then they got hit with an RPG. And so Mike makes a radio call, hey, we're hit. And he says, but I've got control of the aircraft. So he levels the wings, and his idea is, okay, I'm just going to make a beeline and go back for the airfield. It's, 3 or 4 minute flight. Just going to level the wings and head back to the airfield. So he makes that call, starts heading in that direction. And then he got probably a mile and a half, far enough away that there was really no friendlies in his location. And his tail rotor came apart. And when a tail rotor comes off a helicopter, they spin out of control. And that's exactly what happened. And we saw it, and we saw them hit from Super 6-2. And we obviously immediately shifted to that crash site because they had basically no support around them. Crash site at Super 6-1's crash site, they at that point had Rangers that were helping to secure the perimeter, evaluating the status of the aircrew on the ground and the others that were on the ground that had crawled out of the back of the aircraft. And so we shifted down to Super 6-4's crash site with Mike Durant, Ray Frank, and then 2 of my crew chiefs in my platoon, Bill Cleveland and Tommy Field. It was pretty apparent with the force that they hit that part of that cabin in the back of the aircraft, like the living space, was compromised. So I think it was Bill Cleveland's side of the aircraft that had collapsed. And then I believe Tommy Field's, we didn't know Tommy's status, but we saw Ray Frank and Mike moving.
Still alive, we think.
And still alive, 100%. So we, again, started doing close air support, and we had the 3 Delta snipers in the back. We had Randy Shugart, Gary Gordon, and Brad Holling, and they were going to work, and they were doing a heck of a job of keeping everybody away from that crash site, as were my crew chiefs with their miniguns, right? Because at that point, the whole city was erupting. So anybody coming towards that crash site can be presumed to be a bad guy and only, had malintent.
What's going on the radio, Jim? Because at this point, you have got to be ungodly concerned, because now you got basically 3 crisis sites in a manner. You've got overwhelming odds. And what are you guys asking for? Like, are you asking for send me this, send me that? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, what is going on?
No, it's a great point, Bob. So we were asking for ground convoy support, right? So we were trying to direct the ground convoy from the tactical target insertion area and where the first crash site was. We were trying to direct the ground convoy over to the second crash site.
Yeah.
That ground convoy got totally, came under very heavy enemy fire, took a lot of casualties, and ended up going back towards the airfield. They then launched another convoy from the airfield to try to get to the second crash site, to Super 6-4's crash site. Same thing. Like, again, the city was erupting in gunfire, and they took a lot of casualties and didn't make it. So at that point, this is probably, 15, 20 minutes. Shugart and Gordon start making a hasty plan in the back of our aircraft, like, hey, like, we see an open area down here. We think we can get Mike and Ray. We see them moving. And I think at this point, I don't know if Ray was out of the aircraft. It might have been. I think Ray had gotten himself out of the aircraft, was badly injured, was like propped up against a tree. Mike had a fractured femur, and his back had fractures in it as well because the aircraft hit so hard. So Mike was not out of the aircraft. And, we were just coming up with a hasty plan of like, hey, Sugar and Gordon are like, hey, we think we can go in there. Now, my crew chief had been shot through the arm, Paul Shannon. So our aircraft was hit by a bunch of, automatic weapons fire. Paul had suffered an injury and a bullet hole in his arm. And so Brad Holling jumped behind his minigun. had replaced him. So Brad, we didn't insert, and Brad was sitting right behind me in the gunner seat.
Yeah.
Shugart and Gordon, kept asking, and we were asking. They were asking their command leadership. I was asking kind of the air mission commander and the ground force commander and the command and control aircraft if we could insert them. And finally, they came back and authorized us to insert them because they knew that the ground convoys were being repelled and not able to get to the second crash site. So we went in, we inserted them, and we got them as close as we could. It was a very densely populated kind of shanty town. And we didn't have fast ropes. They were gone, right? We had already used them on the first insertion. So we landed as close as we could, and then we got airborne and started again, just addressing any threats that were coming towards the aircraft with minigun suppressive fire. And we could see Brad and Gary make it to the aircraft. And they started kind of assessing the injuries of the aircrew on the ground. And then
while receiving fire at the same time.
While they were receiving fire, right? And then we got hit by an RPG.
Oh my gosh.
And when we got hit in the right engine of the aircraft, just behind my seat was the crew chief's station, which is where Brad Holling, the Delta sniper, was sitting. He took the brunt of the impact. We had ballistic blankets that lined the floor of the aircraft that really saved all of our lives. But it took most of the fragments from the rocket propelled grenade and sent it up into the right engine, which caused that engine to fail. We had one remaining engine that was like partially operating. We had chunks of our rotor system missing, and our windscreen and other things were blown out, and I had a pretty nasty concussion. We were lucky. We were both lucky and pretty well trained. Mike Gaffina, the other pilot, and I didn't even know. I didn't know if he was alive. He didn't know if I was alive. There's smoke everywhere. We just kind of leveled the aircraft, and within probably 10 seconds, we were able to do it like a controlled crash over by a place called Newport, right on the ocean, which was a UN logistics base where goods and services would be delivered to the port. And we had, it was either Malaysians or Pakistanis picking up goods and services there that were part of the UN contingent. And they saw us, come smoking in there. We were missing the right landing gear. We kind of, almost rolled the aircraft over when we landed, but we're lucky enough not to. And then as soon as we got on the ground and things came to a stop, we were assessing each other's injuries, right? Again, Paul Shannon had been shot through the arm in the back of the aircraft. He had also now been hit with some of the shrapnel from the RPG. Brad had lost his leg, was bleeding really, really, significantly, and actually had the most medical training of all of us in the aircraft. So Brad was, he was going into shock, and he was talking us through how to save his own life, which was absolutely amazing. He was like, "Hey, you got to get a tourniquet on me. I'm graying. My vision's graying out." Goes,
He's
I'm going into shock. You need to get a tourniquet on me. You need to get an IV into me. And again, a bunch of us had received a little bit of combat medic training, but trying to get a IV into somebody that's in shock like that is almost impossible unless you're a medical professional and you know what you're doing. And lucky for us, though,
he needs a surgeon.
Yeah. And we had the UN convoy come over and set up a perimeter around us, give us an IV bag. I don't know that any of us were ever successful, but we got a tourniquet on Brad. The search and rescue aircraft assigned to our contingent had also taken an RPG. It had actually gone and passed between the rotor blade and the top cowling of the aircraft and caused damage. But they were able to fly the aircraft back to the airfield and pick up our spare aircraft by that time. And then they came out and they were able to get Brad and Paul to a medical treatment facility quickly. And then they came back and they got myself and Mike Gaffina and Mason Hall from the crash site, flew us back to the airfield and the command post operations. And then I started doing essentially a debrief of General Garrison and the ops boss of what I saw last in the battle. And then probably 30 or 40 minutes later, the command and control aircraft just needed a pilot swap. The guy was fatigued. And so I jumped in the aircraft and became the pilot in command of Super 6-3, the command and control aircraft flying.
And you go back out there.
I went back out, and I flew the rest of the night to the next morning. And I was with Colonel Tom Matthews and Colonel Gary Harrell. Tom was the air mission commander, and Gary Harrell was the overall ground commander and a squadron commander at Delta. Phenomenal. Both of them phenomenal leaders.
How's this all end, Jimmy? Like, you go back out there, there's obviously an intense battle that's raging almost a full day. When you go back out there, has it gotten a lot worse? Has it gotten any better? Is there any soft side of the bad guys that the guys on the ground can get through? Or what exactly was going on?
Great question, Bob. Once it got dark, we could use our night vision goggles and take advantage of our, capabilities to fight at night.
Yeah.
And so that helped us.
Did it scare them off? Do you know what I'm saying? Because of that ability
not initially.
Not initially.
They thought they were going to overrun us, and they were damn close. Right?
Sure.
I would say, that one of the many things that kept us from being overrun was the heroism of the little bird gunships.
Yeah.
At night, they were just doing countless, gun runs. And keeping everybody away from, now we had like clumps of soldiers, bogged down basically in the city, not able to move.
Yeah.
And we were trying to get, everything from IV bags to food and water and everything in between to those people. And the gunships, the little bird gunships, just did like a phenomenal job. And they were able to kind of gain back the momentum of the battle. The other thing that helped immeasurably was the UN's armored vehicles. And so, again, some of the special operations forces were able to commandeer some of those vehicles, but they still had like Pakistani or Malaysian drivers. And then the 10th Mountain Division, they just did, one of my classmates actually, phenomenal leader on the ground, and they drove back into a raging battle to try to help.
Yeah.
So we kind of regrouped and, somewhere after midnight, right? And before sunrise, it was actually as sunrise was coming up, we started this thing called the Mogadishu Mile and trying to exfiltrate the entire fighting force from the city to a place called Pakistani Stadium, which was on the north side of Mogadishu. And they didn't have enough room in the armored vehicles for the wounded soldiers and everybody to get in. So they had to run alongside the armored vehicles about a mile or more. And that's where the name, the Mogadishu Mile, comes from. And then we consolidated at Pakistani Stadium. And then from there, we're able to get everybody lifted out the next day. And then we were assessing our killed and missing, right? So we had a bunch of soldiers killed in action. And then we had Mike Durant and his whole crew.
I was going to ask,
and Brandy and Gary were essentially missing in action at that point.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, when did you realize that they've got him, or the other people may have been killed, or you know what I mean? Like, when did you guys even realize that?
Myself and Scott Miller, and Scott was he was the troop commander in Delta of the main force going into the target area, who would eventually be a 4-star general, right? Scott Miller. He and I remember spending the next, I don't know how many hours doing overflights of the city trying to find and locate.
Yeah.
But then we started seeing CNN footage come in, and we actually had Christian Amanpour there. And she was going to show the dead soldiers' bodies being dragged through the streets. And kind of went to, I think it was, and you'd have to ask General Garrison, but Bill Garrison for comment. And he and the other commanders were like, hey, we want to inform the families before you go airing this on CNN. And she refused. She was like, nope, this is national news, international news. We want this to be. So Scotty and I were reviewing some of the footage, the raw footage she had, to try to see if we could identify the bodies, right? And they were badly desecrated. So there are a lot of bodies that were burned inside of tires in the city. There were others that were decapitated. And so we were trying to go through this identification process. And then we were able to recover some of the bodies, days after. and eventually account for everybody and the remains.
And
Yeah,
there was
yeah.
one that was kidnapped
Mike.
or
Yeah.
taken
So
hostage.
Mike was taken hostage, and Mike Durant, and Mike he for about 14 days he was held captive, and just reverted to his training. So he that we learned in SEER school, or Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape school.
Yeah.
And just did a remarkable job of like keeping himself alive and then making sure he didn't compromise himself really in any way until we could figure out exactly where they were holding him. And in the end, it was a former ambassador that had flown over there that had worked in Somalia previously and had relationships that came over and really negotiated Mike's release, obviously with the power of the U.S. military standing behind him, saying, "Hey, we're gonna crush your entire city if you don't turn over Mike Durant and the remains of the others that were killed during the battle." So that's how the battle ended. Yeah.
Now, how much more time after all this were you in Mogadishu?
Good question. So I went. So that was October of '93, and then we did a Haiti deployment in '94. If you remember Haiti.
I remember it. Yeah.
And then it was February '95, when I transitioned into the FBI. And I literally was, my last day in the military was February 20th of 1995. And on February 21st, 1995, I was sitting at Quantico as a new agent.
You brought this up earlier, but it's inquisitive because obviously that story is unbelievable. And I'm so proud and glad you told it. But what made you want to go into the Bureau? Like, where's that pop up? You mentioned it earlier on when we were talking, but I think that's worth talking about.
Yeah, it was really just a way to continue to serve, where I thought I could have greater value to like our nation here at home, and also balance a family. Right, I wanted to raise a family, and at that point, I had my son Zach. So Marie, who was probably 2 as I was transitioning out of the military, and then Zach was born shortly thereafter when I got into the FBI.
Yeah.
So
less deployments in the FBI. Still some. You're
less
still deploying,
deployments.
but maybe not.
I was in Philadelphia, chasing drug dealers and drug traffickers and bank robbers.
Everybody was back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. But unlike the CIA or the military, you're able to.
Yeah, that's right. No, the CIA actually, they did recruit me, and I asked them point blank. I was like, well, of a 20 or 25 year career, like how many years would have to be overseas? And they're like, well,
A lot.
20 of a 25 is probably right. And it, it obviously depends on the position you go in. But my skill set was one that I had experience overseas in those types of locations. So I was pretty sure that if I had gone into the agency, which would have been an awesome, rewarding career, I probably would have been in unaccompanied assignments quite often, just based on my background.
Do you still fly today? How long
I did in the FBI. I flew until probably the last time I really flew was maybe 2006 or 7.
Yeah.
And then I flew on and off as the HRT commander, helped the FBI acquire Blackhawks for their fleet. And then probably my last flight was in probably 2015 or so. Yeah. Yes, I miss it.
Yeah.
But I'd flown thousands of hours, so I don't miss it that much. I miss it, but not that much.
Yeah, I don't blame you. When you think about your life and looking back at everything, what's some of the big, just overwhelming things that you are glad that you did or you accomplished in your life? Obviously, there's so many, but when you think about it, I mean, you were a military officer, West Point graduate. You survived and fought for our country, in some of the most horrific conditions. You served in the FBI all over the world. You're on the hostage rescue. You're the commander of the hostage rescue team. Like, what's some of the key things? Like, if you could narrow it down to 1 or 2 things, it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, hands down, the thing I'm probably most proud of are my adult kids, right? And the fact that they chose the different military services and to continue to serve. So, my oldest daughter Marie and son-in-law Daniel were in the Army. They finished up after 6 years and transitioned to the private sector. My middle son Zach and his wife are also they're serving. So Zach is a KC-135 pilot in the Air Force.
Oh, really?
He's an instructor pilot now at their schoolhouse. And his wife, Tana, is a Army Reserve officer, Medical Service Corps officer. And then my youngest son, Mark, is a Coast Guard Lieutenant JG. So he just finished up his first tour in Galveston and is now on his second assignment in North Carolina.
Oh, so much pride in them. That's incredible.
Yeah. So that was a lot for them to tolerate over my career. You know, I mean, even in the FBI, Bob, right? So as soon as you and I came in, it became a very international organization. You try to remember the deployments. I think it was like, Kenya and Tanzania.
Oh, yeah. Blow them up and then everybody go.
I don't think people think about that when you think FBI, though.
I don't think people...
Kosovo,
right? Serbia,
99,
Macedonia, Pakistan, coup.
The USS Cole bombing.
Yemen.
Yeah.
Probably,
and then Afghanistan and Iraq repetitively
Afghanistan,
for
Iraq.
10 years, right?
Yeah.
Just in and out of theater in support of the military. Mm-hmm. And that was really a fascinating capability that we were able to bring to the Special Operations Command and the military from the FBI was kind of bringing the rule of law forward and helping them understand how to do appropriate interviews and interrogations, do triage crime scenes, in an austere environment, battlefield environment, evidence collection, and then also being able to prosecute international terrorists back here in the U.S. based on kind of the rules of evidence in a battlefield environment.
I think that was a huge surprise for me. I mean, meeting Bob and you and learning about the hostage rescue team, I didn't realize that the FBI deployed internationally in those environments.
It's not, honestly, it's not just a hostage rescue team. I mean, the hostage rescue team obviously deploys, like Jimmy said, with other service partners in very austere environments, and that's putting it mildly. But I mean, the FBI, ever since 9/11, when it became a global war on terror, I mean, we're in hundreds of countries, full-time, all the time. And that's our legal attache program. And people don't realize that.
70 plus countries have a presence, a permanent presence.
I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of people. And really, when we took it to the fight after 9/11, you had to be, because it was such a global environment. I don't think people understand that at all. It's a misconception, I think,
Well, and we'd become a partner of the militaries, right?
Oh,
in over that 10-year period, it was even longer than that, of the global war on terrorism. And we learned how to interoperate as an interagency and, bring the rule of law forward, basically, and in the intel collection mission forward to try to protect the citizens here in the U.S. And it was a powerful apparatus that we developed over a decade plus. I mean, by visionary leaders like Stan McChrystal and Bill McCraven, and those guys were the center of gravity, right? And we were a supporting entity to them, trying to bring the rule of law forward in a different way of gathering intel, and then trying to again, address every terrorism threat here in the U.S. by going beyond our borders and not letting them in.
That's right.
And then trying to, if we did have intel from a battlefield that related to somebody within the U.S., we would action that intelligence immediately.
It's an incredible story.
I'll tell a funny story about the rule of law, but if you remember the fall of the Gaddafi regime in Libya, and I was the agent in charge of Colorado and Wyoming, out in Denver, and who knew we had the largest Libyan diaspora in the country,
really, in
Colorado. And I remember getting a call from our former boss, Sean Joyce, and Sean was the deputy director. And he said, "Hey, we need an on-scene commander for the Benghazi investigation, right? When our consulate was attacked and we lost Americans." And I said, "Absolutely. I'm ready to go. Just send me over there." So we went through, and I rotated in there as an on-scene commander in a pretty austere and very dangerous environment in Libya, working with the agency and the military and other entities. Fast forward, I get promoted, go back to Washington, D.C. as an assistant director in charge of global incident response, and the mission to go locate and essentially bring the head terrorist that we had developed the investigation on years earlier, worked with the interagency, and we got to basically kind of bring it full circle, where we went in, the FBI with a military special operations detachment, and were able to find the guy and bring him back to a U.S. jail in New York City.
Who knew? I mean, and I give credit to the FBI and their recruitment process. There's such diverse backgrounds with those that get selected to go in, and that your international experience and, with these special forces, is probably so advantageous in your future FBI career as well.
Yeah, and you'd see the same faces, right? So it was really, and it was like trust. And you're talking about leadership in general. It's a small community of people that trust each other and have risked their lives with each other, across the globe previously. And so I'd run into, my old warrant officers and my old commanders and my old crew chiefs, or, you look at Scott Miller's career, right? I'd touch base with Scott, it seemed like, in Afghanistan or Iraq, annually, and many of the other folks that I'd served with, but now, as an FBI agent. So.
Yeah. Well, I think a true American hero, and obviously hearing the stories of others that were with you during this time.
Yeah, I don't consider myself a hero, but I worked with phenomenal people. I was trained, and again, I'm a bit like Forrest Gump. I just kept raising my hand, and I found a lot of reward. It's interesting, in all the human tragedy that you do get exposed to, you get exposed to kind of the best and the worst of humanity. Because in tragedy, you'll always see empathy and compassionate human beings step forward and do the right thing. Whether that's like, your fellow federal agents or just the population. You'll see just like citizens respond and help one another in unbelievable conditions, right? I mean, you think about Kosovo, Bob, it was genocide, right, that occurred there. And we were brought there as part of a UN tribunal investigation. And it was probably one of the more difficult things that I've seen across the planet, like how humans could be that torturous to one another.
We could do a whole talk on just the Kosovo deployment.
But you would see empathetic citizens and U.S. soldiers and others that just wanted to help kind of the grieving families identify the remains of their families that have been buried in, like, a pit with 200 others, right? So,
and children walking around those communities.
There was, not that I don't want to get into a lot of the Kosovo stuff, because there was some really horrible stuff there. But the one thing that, we were there several times, but Jimmy and I, there is some in all this chaos and just man's inhumane actions to man, which there's a lot of. Jim and I, not to get into where in Kosovo, we're standing on a corner, and I know you're going to remember this when I say it. There's this guy walking down the street, no gun, but he's the enemy. And we had every right to kill this guy. It's the middle of a flat-out war. And he walked up, and you remember we got the translator to talk to him. And it was the enemy of the whole thing that was going on with Serbs and Albanians and stuff. And the translator said I'm paraphrasing, but you can correct me, I come from the mountains, but I think my family's dead. My house is right down this alley. Can you take me to my house to see if my family's dead? Jim and I had a conversation with the translator to convey to this guy that if this is a trap, the first dude that's going to die is you. In a nice way. But we went, this is man's inhumanity to man. This is a true story. And so, but there is some humanity in this, because we didn't have to do that. And we
had an archaeologist.
We brought an archaeologist, a forensic biologist.
Right.
We took a transit, just me and him, with automatic weapons going down this alley. And we come to this bombed out shell of a rubble home. And
he goes, this is it.
And he goes, that's my house. And of course, we're worried about booby traps. But we make sure we get in there. And this is just horrible. The forensic biologist and the other guys go in. They find I'm making this up, but a leg bone. And he says it's a
hip bone.
And a hip bone, and says it's a 35-year-old female. They can tell.
Wow.
And through the translator, the guy goes, that's my wife.
Yep.
And then we find his daughter, his son. These are all bones.
Buried in the rubble of what was
buried
his
in
home
the
at that
rubble.
point.
But here's this guy that's
They were
the enemy
burned
by all
alive.
rights. Like I said, we could have killed this guy. But the reality is, and I think we're the good part of this, he needed closure, even though he's the enemy, and we walked him down there, but it's just man's inhumanity, man. And this doesn't touch Kosovo. Like, there's been so much written about that war, and I think all of it's very shallow compared to what we saw. But I just remember that. It was one of these kind of, and then I remember when we came back out, he shook me and Jimmy's hand, and he walked back off into the mountains to go get back into the war. But to look at that guy telling the translator, well, that's my son, because it's a 17-year-old white male.
Yep.
And they could tell.
In this moment, you're at the most human moment.
And by the way, if you would have saw the way this was structured, this isn't like out of a book. And it was just, it really showed the two different sides of man. Like our side trying to be humane, and then the whole side of how people can be just so inhumane to people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even Somalia, right? So, during the day, again, we're just U.S. soldiers hanging out on a base, right? And we would see starving Somali kids and children, and we'd hand out MREs.
Yeah.
We'd hand out the meals ready to eat to all the kids, and then
give them the candy out of it.
Yeah, and then, I mean, you'd go out on a mission and you'd be shot at
face one armed and ready to kill you.
By the same kids.
Yeah.
Or not necessarily the kids, but certainly their parents probably or relatives. And so it is. And so like with every tragic thing and incident that I've responded to, you do see both the best and the worst of humanity in different ways. And that was a very poignant example in Kosovo of that soldier just literally coming out of nowhere.
Just walking down the middle of the street.
He risked his life.
And, he knew, because we're standing there with automatic weapons looking at him.
Yep.
And every step he took, he's am I going to get killed or am I going to go do this? And
he needed closure.
He needed closure. And the last thing I would say too, and the resilience of little kids is amazing to me, because it was absolutely genocide in Kosovo, but
at a mass scale.
At a mass scale, but you would come up upon these herds of little kids, that have no family because they're all dead, and
orphans, right? Orphans, like no parents,
but they were like little packs.
Yeah,
and there'd be like a 9-year-old little girl running this whole pack of kids. And we would always give them
spoke broken English.
Yeah, broken English, but could speak French, German, Albanian, just
surviving.
Just the ability to survive in this environment. This 9-year-old little girl, and I've got pictures of this. This 9-year-old girl could speak 4 languages, broken English, but could speak a whole bunch of other language, and she's running this little herd of kids trying to survive. And we used to always give them our MREs and give them the candy and stuff. But that's truly amazing side of it, but just very, very unreal. Jim, I can't thank you enough. One, you're an unbelievable friend who I respect immensely. I've really enjoyed our relationship over the years, but honestly, you're humble. I know you were surrounded by a bunch of heroes, and God bless every man and person that worked in any environment like that, and the things you've done for our country. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Your story is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, so it was a pleasure. It was an honor to kind of sit and reminisce with you. I look forward to going and drinking a glass of bourbon later.
When we might be able to make that happen. Hey, listen, thanks for tuning into the podcast. Many more interviews coming up on American Heroes. And remember, until I see you again, peace, love each other. We need it.